welcome to the Extra Mile. I'm Linda BOUDREAUX. Our guest today is Clem Goldberger. She is with the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and I am so excited that she's here. Clem, thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I have not, as I told you, been to the museum, but just in talking to you in the few minutes before we started, I'm ready to go. Yeah, I think it is just phenomenal. Now, the National World War II Museum, this is the only one in the country, right?
Well, there are other museums which deal with the Second World War, but our museum has been designated by Congress as America's official museum of the Second World War for the nations, and we're so proud that that honor was given to New Orleans and to the state of Louisiana.
That's a huge honor.
It is,
and
indeed.
They gave it to us for a reason, or more than one reason.
Indeed, and it largely is because of Andrew Jackson Higgins and the Higgins boats, and Stephen Ambrose, the noted author and historian who was based at the University of New Orleans. Do you know about the Higgins boats?
No, but I think probably other people don't know either.
Well, many people were not familiar with them until they saw Saving Private Ryan and the boats that landed the troops on Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. And when Stephen Ambrose was interviewing Dwight Eisenhower for his biography, Eisenhower asked Ambrose if he had had the pleasure of meeting Andrew Higgins, and Ambrose had not. Higgins had died before Stephen Ambrose moved to New Orleans, and Eisenhower said, well, that's a shame, because Andy Higgins won World War II for the Allies.
Wow.
And he went on to say that if it had not been for the design of those boats, those shallow draft boats that were able to land men and equipment over open beaches, the entire strategy of World War II would have to have changed.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
20,000 plus of those boats were designed and tested and built right there in New Orleans and tested on Lake Pontchartrain. And they were used in every amphibious invasion of the war, not just in Normandy, but on every Pacific island, Italy and the Mediterranean, on and on. And without that design, we would have to have attacked the enemy through heavily fortified ports, deep-water ports, and the results would have been far more disastrous for our troops.
So we owe him much gratitude.
Indeed.
And all these years later, here we are.
Here we are.
Celebrating. Now, before we started today's show, too, we were talking about the museum and the importance, I think, of remembering World War II,
Yes.
honoring not just the war, but the time. I think it's the time. And the war was a pivotal part of the time, but there was a lot going on.
There was. Well, we have come to call it the war that changed the world. There were 16 million men and women who fought in uniform and literally preserved our freedom and kept the world safe for democracy, defeated totalitarianism on two fronts of the world, multiple fronts of the world. But beyond those who served in uniform, there were millions more men, women, even children who did their part. And the watchword of the day was, we're all in this together. And women went to work in the factories because the men had to go overseas. It was really the beginning of women in the workplace.
Rosie the Riveter.
That's
we
it.
Still got
We
her.
can do it.
We can do it.
Children learned how to knit. We have photographs of children knitting woolen socks and scarves for the soldiers in school, in recess. They would knit. People planted victory gardens. Everyone rationed. They recycled. It was the beginning of the recycling movement. It was the beginning of volunteerism. All of these things that we now think are new ideas really began in World War II.
And I think, as you were talking, things that we think kind of define this country, and some are challenges like civil rights and women's rights that define us, also kind of had some emerging roots during that era.
Absolutely. And some of them had difficult beginnings, particularly among African American and other minorities. With African Americans, they called it fighting on two fronts because they were fighting totalitarianism abroad, but it was still a segregated army. And when they came home, there were still Jim Crow laws. So, and for Japanese Americans, they were asked to enlist and fight for this country, and yet their parents were being held in internment camps. So there are a lot of conundrums embedded in this war, but yet there was still a greater good that they were fighting for. And some of those ethical and moral dilemmas are actually handled in a very interesting way in our newest exhibition pavilion that I'd love to tell you about today.
Okay, so we're not skirting these issues. We
No.
really are looking at them. Is that right?
We must. We absolutely must. And we have spent years and engaged some of the brightest scholars, World War II scholars, in how to deal with them in a very straightforward way for today's audiences. But our newest exhibition pavilion, which just opened in mid-January, is the U.S. Freedom Pavilion, the Boeing Center, and I'll tell you more about the very exciting aspects of it, but to focus on one aspect in particular for the moment, there is an interactive area called What Would You Do? And there are interactive touch screens in which the visitors see videos in which some of our celebrity friends of the museum, including Wendell Pierce, Patricia Clarkson, John Seda, and others, tell a story, but not a fictional story. These are real incidences from World War II that have a built-in ethical or moral dilemma, and one of them I just described, in which a young Japanese American is asked to enlist, and yet his family is in an internment camp. And then the question is posed to the visitor, what would you do? And there's an A or B answer. Would you enlist or would you decline? And the visitor chooses by pressing a button. And then the big screen tells what all of his fellow visitors choose.
Okay.
And then it tells what actually happened in the war. How many people, how many young Japanese Americans chose to enlist versus chose not to. So we use these as teaching moments for our visitors, and we have about a dozen or so of these scenarios. Another, for example, is you have to give a command about sending aircraft up to strafe a German supply train, which you know is of critical strategic importance, but you know that there may be civilian casualties. What do you do?
So you're really giving us an opportunity to ask the hard questions of ourselves and see, maybe look within our own souls a little bit. Huh?
Exactly,
Wow.
exactly. So we do, war is not all black or white.
No,
there are many
no.
gray areas. And I can remember my father telling me about some of his own war experiences.
He was a World War II
My
veteran.
father was a World War II
As was
veteran.
mine.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess most of us in our generation have parents who
Exactly,
fought, who served in some
exactly.
way.
So we do ask the hard questions. There's a lot to explore and a lot to understand, and it's not just all, rah-rah, although certainly we take great pride in everything that our servicemen and women did, but we do have to take deep looks at our own history.
But you're helping me realize, once again, that history is really kind of living in a way. I mean, we are here where we are today because of the decisions and actions that were made 60 years ago, 60, 75, 70 years ago. So, it still matters. It still matters very much today. So the museum has some living parts to it than I would think,
Absolutely. And I'd love to tell you a little more about this wonderful new
Please.
pavilion.
Please.
Well, it's the not only the newest, but it's the largest pavilion on our ever-growing campus. It's the equivalent of about a 9-story building.
Wow.
One whole face of it is glass, and hung from its soaring ceiling are 6 World War II aircraft, the star of which is the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, My Gal Sal. This is a mammoth heavy bomber, and she has quite a story of her own. She was had to put down on the Greenland ice cap on her way to England in bad weather, and the crew was ultimately rescued, but the plane sat on the ice cap for more than 50 years and was only recovered a few years ago and was restored, and we were very fortunate that she was given to us, and now she hangs aloft in the museum along with, oh my goodness, I don't want to say all the names because I'll surely miss one of them, but among the others are a TBM Avenger, which is the type of plane that President George H.W. Bush flew, a P-51 Mustang, which is the fighter escort that the Tuskegee Airmen made famous, and several others. I'd love you to go to everyone to go to the website.
We all just need to go.
Yes, come to the museum, but go to the website first and see all of these.
Wow.
And there is another interactive exhibit with all of the 464 Medal of Honor recipients from World War II with touch screens, so you can call up each of them individually and read their stories and talk about moving.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most dramatic aspect experience of the new pavilion is the USS Tang. It's called Final Mission, the USS Tang submarine experience. The Tang was the most decorated American submarine in World War II, and this interactive experience recreates its last war patrol in the Formosan Straits. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a tremendously dramatic 15-minute experience.
It's a virtual experience.
It's a virtual experience. You don't get wet,
but you might get scared. I think.
No, you don't get.
Okay.
You don't get scared, but it is. It's moving. It's powerful. It's educational. When you arrive, you are given what's called a watch bill in the Navy, which gives you the persona of an actual. It's a card. Gives you the persona of an actual crew member. You go to a battle station we've recreated the inside of the submarine, and it tells you what battle station to go to, and you man that battle station and recreate the duties of that individual. It's
This
tremendous.
is also very sophisticated too, isn't it? I mean,
It is sophisticated, and this particular pavilion, the focus of it is really to bring to life and pay tribute to the tremendous generation of the industrial might that America brought to bear in a matter of months. You know, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, the American military was 19th in the world, behind Romania. That's how unprepared we were for war. And within a matter of months, we had to gear up this incredible war effort.
And we're all in this together. That's when you take the energy of all of us and focus it, we can do. And I think we still have that kind of can-do attitude.
I think, and we need it every day, don't
we? We really, really do. So what is the reason for the museum? How did it get started? What is the museum's itself story?
Well, Stephen Ambrose, as I mentioned, and our current president, Dr. Nick Mueller, were professors together at the University of New Orleans. They were friends of 30 years, and as they like to tell this story, they were in the backyard after class one day, and Dr. Ambrose had been researching D-Day, and he ultimately was a consultant to Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg on Band of Brothers. And he had been recording the oral histories of D-Day veterans just on a little cassette recorder. And he knew that the Higgins boats had been tested on Lake Pontchartrain, and he said, we just need a little small museum to pay tribute to that. And then it just grew from there.
So it's just the idea of a couple of guys in the backyard.
Yeah.
Don't you love it?
Exactly. And then more and more, though, we realized that, of the 16 million who served in uniform, fewer than 1.4 million are alive today.
Yeah.
So we are, we are rushing to complete this campus while we still have World War II vets with us to be honored. And every time we have a grand opening, and it's so moving to have these wonderful veterans with us, and we have veteran volunteers with us every day, and to have guests go through the galleries with them, it's so delightful, and it's so meaningful to everyone, and to have them interact with the school children is priceless. Absolutely priceless.
It is. So was that kind of the vision from the beginning of this museum?
To pay tribute to the veterans, and Stephen Ambrose's viewpoint, his other book that is so well known is Citizen Soldier. Yeah. He believed in telling the story through their eyes, not through the eyes of the brass. And so that has always been our approach, really, to tell it through the vernacular of the men and women who
the regular folks who
folks.
volunteered or got drafted and said, you know what, I'm going to fight for freedom. Yeah. But there's a lot, this is a very complex museum. This is not, there's a lot going on there. So what else do you all have?
Well, we do try to approach this on every level, not just the military. And there are a lot of things that are on the lighter side. Right now, we have a wonderful exhibition that came to us from the Pro Football Hall of Fame called Gridiron Glory, and it came to us at the time of the Super Bowl, but will be with us through May the 5th. And people say, why?
I'm thinking, why?
Exactly.
Great, but why?
It has a marvelous section on football during World War II, and it talks about how so many professional ball players enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor, and it talks about
that really is true.
It's absolutely true. It was true of baseball as well, and it has a whole section about how important professional sports were to the morale of the country during the war years, and so we were proud to host it. And would love everyone to come see it. And the other thing,
but that'll be there till May 5th.
May 5th.
Okay. And what's in that? What do we have there?
Well, marvelous artifacts of particularly the early years, and there's also a whole section called "Let's Hear It for the Home Team."
Okay.
Some Saints memorabilia, but it's also very interactive. There are molds of football players' hands and thighs and soldiers and. If you want to feel petite, you can compare yourself to some of these. But you can listen to some of the early broadcasts. Interestingly, many people found out about Pearl Harbor because it happened on a Sunday, and many football games were.
The radio.
They were listening to football games on the radio, and the football games were interrupted. And Pearl Harbor was announced. In fact, the Washington team was being played, and they came on, was playing, and they came on and said, "Will all military personnel please report to your duty stations?"
Wow! Talk about a moment in time.
Exactly.
Huh? Yeah.
The other thing that we're very proud of is our stage door canteen, which is modeled after the stage door canteens of the war years, and it's where we pay tribute to the stars of stage and screen who contributed to the war effort with their time and their talent. And we've just opened a brand new show called My Way. It's a tribute to Frank Sinatra,
Who did it his
who
way.
did it his way, but he was tremendously popular during World War II and beyond. Last weekend was opening weekend. We got rave reviews, and it will be playing through May the 12th,
Okay.
every weekend, Friday, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee. So we would love your viewers to make a little weekend trip over to New Orleans and see this stunning cast and that timeless music of Frank Sinatra.
So is there a dinner theater associated with this?
It is a dinner theater, and you can come for dinner in the show or just come for the show if you
Okay,
like.
whatever
Yeah,
you wanna do.
Exactly. So,
That sounds like a lot of fun. So how often do you do these?
there's something going on every weekend. Typically, a show like this will run for about 2 or 2.5 months. Over the summer, we will do a rotating series of entertainment, so there'll be a different show every weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, so anybody that's going to New Orleans for the weekend can build into their weekend activities an
Absolutely.
evening at the Stage Door Cafe.
Indeed, and if you happen to be coming midweek, on Wednesday matinees, we have our Victory Bells, who are our own Andrews sisters,
Okay.
although more glamorous. So on Wednesdays, we do like a buffet matinee with the Victory Bells, and so that would be fun if you're coming in midweek.
Okay. So there are all
So-
kinds of fun things that we can do when we
Indeed.
go.
And it's truly a museum for every generation. Young people, even very young kids, can enjoy it. Not so much the more profound aspects, perhaps, but they can enjoy looking at the planes and the boats. And
Absolutely.
teenagers will find something to enjoy, and of course, the seniors will enjoy it because it's their generation. The most delightful thing is to see multi-generations come together. That will just touch your heart as nothing else.
Because it really, it's teaching the little ones and remembering for the older ones.
Exactly, and we're open 7 days a week. In fact, we're only closed 4 days in the entire year.
What days are you closed?
We're-
Christmas?
Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Mardi Gras Day, and Thanksgiving Day.
Well, I got that. That's pretty easy. You know, I'm not sure that everyone in Lafayette knows exactly where the museum is.
The museum is in what's called the Warehouse District. We're actually just 1 block off Lee Circle, if that helps everyone. So it's, just a block and a few steps from the streetcar. So it's
okay,
an
so
easy walk.
You don't have to get your car out and
No, not at all.
park?
In fact, there is a new hop-on, hop-off sightseeing bus in New Orleans that makes a stop right at the museum. So lots of ways to find us.
I mean, I have to tell you, I have heard everyone that has ever gone that I've talked to has been totally blown away by the museum. It's not just a museum. It's a people come back out of it different. They come back moved, I think, in ways that they didn't expect.
Well, I just realized again that you haven't been
I
with
haven't
us
been.
yet. And we have a film that's been running for a couple of years that was produced for us by Tom Hanks
I've heard
called
of it,
Beyond
yeah.
All Boundaries, which is a 4D film. It's 47 minutes, and it's a marvelous introduction to the war and to the museum. And it is stunning. It is riveting. We watch people come out of it, and they're speechless. So I always recommend people begin their visit with that, if possible. But whenever you see it during the course of a visit, it is not to be missed.
And you could spend the day there if you chose.
Without doubt.
Well, I am excited about this. I really so appreciate you coming up from New Orleans and sharing that. Are there any kind of special things that before we close today that you want people to be sure to see or be sure to catch while they're down there?
But I would say Beyond All Boundaries is probably the
first step?
The first step, yes.
Okay, and then the new pavilion is definitely something
Yes.
a don't miss. Is
I
that
don't
right?
miss, yes.
Well, thank you so much, and I guess you have rotating exhibits and things.
We do, actually, we do. We have one that is nearing its end called guest of the Third Reich, which is how American POWs in Europe referred to themselves, which is fascinating.
Okay. So we'll need to catch that one and keep an eye out for the ones that are coming on.
Indeed,
Okay.
indeed.
We're out of time, but thank you so much for
It
being
was my
here.
pleasure. Thank
And
you.
I hope you'll come back and tell us, update us.
I would love to.
Thank you. And I want to thank you. We have been talking to Clem Goldberger with the National World War II Museum. I'm Linda BoudreauX. You've been watching The Extra Mile.